I ran into my secretly wedded wife at a bar. She was holding hands with her first love, and I was with my lover. Just 10 minutes ago, we updated each other about our plans. She said she had a meeting. I said I had to work late. In front of strangers, we pretended not to know each other, shaking hands and smiling politely. But when we got home that night, she grabbed me with a dangerous grin. "Quite the player, aren't you, husband?" When I saw Helen at the bar, I turned around to leave immediately. But my friend pulled me over to her, smiling obsequiously. "This is the friend I was talking about, Helen from Starlex." Then he introduced me to Helen. "Sam, the director at Sunrise. Super professional." He gave a thumbs up. "You should hit him up for your projects, Sam's the guy." Helen and I locked eyes. She was with Alex, but her gaze lingered on Karina and me holding hands. Then she gave a playful smile. "Nice to finally meet you," she said, extending her hand. "A director in a bar? Aren't you supposed to be super busy and working late?" Her fingers dug into my palm as she spoke, and I flinched, retorting. I thought Helen would be packed with meetings right now. We exchanged a glance, hinting at tension, then let go and turned away. The booth was filled with people we knew well. But Helen and I had kept our marriage a secret. No one except our parents knew. 7 years married, and still everyone thinks we're single, always trying to set us up with someone. "This must be Helen's first love," a friend said, holding a drink. Ever since Alex went abroad 7 years ago, she stayed single, waiting for him. Such a catch, no wealthy suitors could win her over. Now he's back, and they're back together. "I bet a wedding's coming." I raised an eyebrow. Under the dim lights, Alex held Helen close, staring straight at me with a smirk. It was the look of a victor over a vanquished. I shifted my gaze, forcing a cold, indifferent smile. People really do forget easily. All those nights I tossed and turned, heart aching like it was in a vice. I thought I'd never get over it. But now it's so faded it feels almost foreign. Whoever's by her side doesn't affect me anymore. Nobody realized Helen and I hadn't appeared together before, so friends assumed we didn't know each other, introducing me to her again. "Sam has been single for so long, never finding the right one," he chuckled. "But he's finally settled down with someone new. Looks like good news is on the horizon." Karina squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with a smile. "I'll be of legal age to marry in 3 months." Even the sultry vibe of the bar couldn't dim her brightness. She had a youthful look, innocent yet steadfast. Meeting Karina was unexpected. After winning an award, I'd been invited back to my alma mater to give a talk. Karina wasn't in the engineering program, just there for extra credit. But after my lecture, she was the first to rush up and stop me. I thought she might be a freshman with questions and stopped to listen. But she just fixed her eyes on me like a puppy finding a bone, and out of nowhere, asked, "Could I get your contact info?" I was taken aback. Karina and Helen didn't look alike. Both beautiful but in different ways. Yet, in that moment, she reminded me of Helen at 22. Her eyes had a hint of mischief as she tilted her chin up to me. Just one? Against my better judgment, I gave it. Later, Karina told me she felt like Cupid had shot a cannonball at her heart. She was completely lost for 2 hours, not hearing a thing, just staring at me. I didn't hide the fact I was married from Karina. It upset her for a bit, but she still came to me. "Just divorce her before I'm of legal age, and I'll forgive you," she said, looking down at her shoes, seeming like a puppy with drooping ears. Only a year and 3 months left. I had just hit a breaking point with Helen then. The breaking point was finding out she'd flown abroad for Alex's birthday. I already knew about Helen and Alex. We all went to the same high school. They were each other's first loves, perfectly matched. Their romance was legendary. Meanwhile, I was just one of many guys quietly crushing on Helen. Helen and Alex dated from 16 to 22, 7 years, splitting after college. Both were high achievers, Helen with a stubborn streak, never backing down. Their fights grew and Alex eventually left for abroad in a huff. Helen didn't chase after him. That's how they ended. Later, she randomly watched me play basketball and asked for my contact on the sidelines. Funny thing, I thought she liked me. Later, I found out that I was just a rebound for her after Alex left. She was feeling empty and bored, so she randomly picked me. Everything that followed was straightforward. She needed comfort after a heartbreak and someone to fend off her family's pressure to get married. And since I had a lot going for me, I was the obvious choice. I had no clue, just foolishly liked her, convincing myself it was true love coming my way. I was all happy, thinking she felt the same. Thinking back, I shook my head and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. How clueless. Helen squinted, swirling her drink with her elegant fingers, a slight smirk on her lips. At your age and not married yet? Don't tell me you're sneaking around on your wife to play with younger girls. I glanced over. In the noisy crowd, Helen stood out unmistakably. With a curvy figure and striking features, her eyes enhanced with eyeliner, she just grew more attractive with age. Wearing a black tight dress, she lounged lazily, and her curves caught the attention of men around. I sipped my drink and casually said, "I'm surprised Helen's not married either. Could it be you're sneaking around on your hubby to meet an old flame?" That came off a bit harsh, leaving our friends silent, none sure why we were at odds right after meeting. A moment later, we both hummed and looked away. Couldn't tell what kind of atmosphere that was at the table. Helen and Alex flirted right in front of me, with Alex eventually feeding her a drink through a deep kiss. The crowd cheered them on, and Helen wiped the drink off her lips, then raised an eyebrow at me. In the past, I might have been furious, but now I even managed to smirk and join their cheers. One more time. Helen's smile faltered. "Sam, why don't you do one too since you brought your partner?" Some tipsy friends handed drinks to me and Karina, winking, "Let's see her kissing skills." Karina came from a good family too, not inferior to Helen's in any way, but she was raised strictly and didn't hang out much. She said I was her first love. Her ears turned bright red. Helen's smile faded, grasping her drink tightly. Unlike Helen, I wasn't into public displays, so I shrugged, about to refuse. Karina leaned in. Her eyes glistened, and she looked up at me. As her delicate face got closer, I realized she's grown up, not the little girl I once thought. Her gaze fell on my lips, glossy and red, softly calling me, "Brother." That's when I finally understood what they mean by innocent yet seductive. Despite her petite figure and sweet demeanor, calling me brother always gave off a youthful vibe. But right then, her eyes tinged with red from the alcohol gave off an unconscious allure. I swallowed hard, unable to find the words to say no to that face. Right before our lips met, Helen stood up abruptly, her face pale. The sudden move knocked several glasses off the table, shattering them on the floor. Everyone was startled, confused by her outburst. I instinctively stepped back. Karina chuckled softly, draping an arm around my neck, and planted a kiss with a hint of malt fragrance on my lips. Back home, as soon as I flicked on the light, I saw Helen sitting on the couch with a sour face. From the bar, she had looked like everyone owed her a fortune. I ignored her, kicked off my shoes to shower and get some sleep. Helen cut in with a snarky tone. "Working overtime at the bar, were you?" I shrugged. "Weren't you having a meeting there too?" Same difference. The longer cigarette ash, unreleased, remained in her fingers as she mocked. "Sam, you're quite something, out clubbing with little girls now." I frowned. "Helen, didn't you once say we're free to do our own thing? What's this, are you jealous?" "Jealous?" She let out a cold laugh, snuffing out her cigarette in the ashtray. "You're overthinking it. I'm just advising as a spouse. Fooling around with kids isn't solid." I shrugged her off. Yet here you are, just as unreliable. I turned and entered the bathroom to shower. The moment the water hit, the door opened. Not having time to react, I felt Helen press against my back. I frowned, but she whispered in my ear, "Kids got nothing on me, do they?" With steam around us, her voice was husky. "Sam," she said it softly. I let out a chilling laugh, turned to grip her waist, flipping the situation. Helen's eyes misty, a smug look on her lips, stood on tiptoe. Just before she could kiss me, I scoffed and pushed her back hard. She stumbled back, glaring. "Sam, Are you losing your mind? I grabbed a towel. Get out. Her face darkened, a storm flickering in her eyes. Angrily, she shouted, Sam, do you really despise me so much? In just lace lingerie, she demanded an explanation. I stood, rigid, seeing her overlap with the photo of her and Alex. On Alex's birthday, I got into a car accident while out on business and ended up alone in a hospital bed. Meanwhile, Helen was lying in Alex's bed, not a stitch on, with red marks suggestively trailing her neck. Alex sent me a picture of her. He didn't say a word, but it was like a slap to my face. The silence was deafening. I clenched my teeth, fighting the sickness in my gut, and pointed to the door. I'll say it one last time. Get out. Helen stared at me for a long time. Her fists were clenched tight, and there was something in her eyes I couldn't read. In the end, she left without a word, slamming the door behind her. I closed my eyes, letting the warm water wash over me, but it couldn't wash away the coldness seeping from my bones. Her touch disgusted me, utterly. It wasn't until 3 years into our marriage that I realized Helen never forgot Alex. We were doing all right back then. Helen was a good wife, pretty, with a good personality, always up for fun. She didn't have that obnoxious rich kid attitude. She'd come straight home after work. She remembered anniversaries, even cooked meals herself, and would ask, smiling, "Is it good?" Sometimes we'd fall asleep holding each other, like a truly happy couple. Until the day we were being intimate and I dripped sweat onto her collarbone. She subconsciously called out, "Alex." It felt like a blow to the head. My mind went blank. Suddenly, I realized, just like spotting one roach means there are more hidden, there was so much more beneath the surface. I found more texts she wouldn't delete, worn photos, secret online accounts. I started yelling, losing my cool, begging, threatening, cursing, trying everything. It was useless. Helen finally just said coldly, "If you can't take it, you can always get a divorce." That's when I realized the past few years were just my own fantasy. Helen never loved me. Her heart always belonged elsewhere. I couldn't compete with the 7 years she had with Alex, no matter how long I stayed with her. I was trapped in misery for who knows how long. The pain like a snake coiled inside, biting my heart at night. Until she flew to England for Alex's birthday, and I spent the night gazing out the window. I still remember that night's moon, round, bright, and cold. After that, I told myself it was over. I gave up. Helen's mom didn't like Alex. There had been some family feud years ago. She liked me and took care of me, even scolded Helen for my sake. A year ago, Helen's mom got really sick. The doctor said she had a year or two if she took it easy. Helen didn't want to upset her mom, so she suggested we wait until her mom's gone to divorce. To compensate, she'd give me 7% of her company's shares. I agreed, not for the money, but out of gratitude for her mom's kindness over the years. Since then, we've been living separate lives. For the next week, Helen didn't come home. We only got in the same car to visit her mom on her birthday. Play the part a bit. Don't let my mom catch on, Helen said, one hand on the wheel. And make sure your little friends don't call, or you might lose your 7% stake. I sneered. Mind your own business. Helen's face darkened, and she fell silent. The old house was in a villa halfway up the mountain. We drove along the winding road, and suddenly Helen's phone rang. She glanced at it and answered immediately. I turned my head away. I used to call Helen a lot too. Back then, couldn't help missing her when we were newlyweds. But she'd rarely answer, always saying she was busy with work. I foolishly believed her. Later, I realized when you really care, you make time no matter how busy. When you don't, even the freest moment is too much to spare. Whatever the call was about, Helen suddenly braked hard, stopping by the roadside. I almost hit the windshield, yelling, "What are you doing?" "I've got to go, you go ahead," Helen said, serious. "Are you nuts? We're on a mountain. At least take me up there." I snapped. "Something urgent with Alex. Get out." Helen snapped back. With that, the car seat lifted automatically, and she shoved me out, nearly twisting my ankle. Before I could curse her, she'd left me in a cloud of exhaust. "Helen, are you insane?" I was furious, jumping about. But she was out of sight now. I pulled out my phone, annoyed to find no signal up there. I hesitated but then started walking up the mountain. Helen's mom never treated me like a stranger. She'd always been good to me. Though they had chefs and maids, she'd cook for me herself every time I visited, remembering my favorite dishes for next time. Helen was always jealous, saying she'd hardly ever tasted her mom's cooking. The first time Helen's mom found out about her cheating, she was furious. Even though she wasn't in the best health, she grabbed a rolling pin and tried to beat sense into Helen. Sam didn't marry you to be treated like this. What spell has Alex cast on you? She doesn't have much time left, and every visit could be the last. Helen might lack empathy, but I don't. The mountain path was all uphill. I had injured my leg in a car accident before. Even though you can't tell just by looking at me, I'm not yet healed enough for long periods of exercise. It wasn't long before the pain became unbearable. I gritted my teeth and pushed on. By the time I was almost there, my knee felt numb from the pain. Then suddenly my phone rang. It was a friend who works at the hospital, one of the few people who knew about me and Helen. He picked up but didn't say anything for a while. Finally, he hesitantly said, "Hey Sam, I just saw your Helen at the hospital with a guy. She even went to the gynecology department." He sent me a picture as he spoke. In the photo, Alex was gently helping Helen at the hospital door, looking really concerned. My friend didn't say anything else, probably trying not to hurt me. I stared at the photo, lost in thought, until a raindrop fell on my phone screen. I looked up, confused, and realized it was raining. The mountain rain came fast, and I was soaked through in no time. The cold seeped into my bones. It was too late to head back down, so I slowly made my way up. The wind and rain were chilly, and I suddenly thought of something from a long time ago. Back in high school, one night after a late study session, I saw some punks harassing a girl in our school's uniform. She wasn't having it, slapped the leader, a guy with dyed yellow hair. He got mad and punched her in the stomach. She groaned and doubled over, but kept her defiance. The punks got angrier and started hitting harder. Back then, I was young and hot-headed. I shouted, "What are you doing?" They ignored me like I wasn't there. I couldn't stand seeing them treat a girl like that, so I jumped in and started fighting them. I trained in kickboxing for a while, and it wasn't long before I had them on the ground. But then two of them pulled out baseball bats. One swung hard at the girl's head. If it connected, it could have cracked her skull open. So I gritted my teeth and shielded her with my body. The bat smashed into my leg, and I felt excruciating pain in my shin. I staggered and hit the ground hard. They must have thought I was with the girl, so they went even harder on me. Took a few more hits until the police arrived, and the punks scattered. That's when I grabbed the girl's wrist, coughed, and mumbled, "Don't be scared." I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The doctor said I had a fractured shin and several other injuries. I'd already had surgery. My parents, worried they couldn't care for me properly, brought me back home after. I nearly forgot about that incident until my car accident. When the doctor asked if I'd had surgery on my leg before, it all came back. They said my old injuries might slow recovery and asked me to get someone to sign off for surgery. I called Helen, but she said she had a company meeting. I had no choice but to sign it myself. The next night, lying in the hospital, Alex sent me a picture. That's when I found out there was no meeting. It was Alex's birthday, and Helen was with him. The hospital window was foggy, the moon outside big and coldly pale. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, spreading through my body. A guy saying he's heartbroken sounds dramatic, but that's the only way I could describe it at that moment. That night, Helen was with Alex, and I was alone in the hospital, awake all night. It was the moment I realized I couldn't wait for her anymore. I rang the bell at the villa, and the housekeeper looked shocked. "Sam, what happened to you?" I waved it off. "I just need a shower." I didn't want Helen's mom to see me like that. She didn't have much time left, and I didn't want to upset her. After cleaning up, I went to Helen's mom's room. She lay in bed, the once elegant and beautiful woman now thin as a twig, her complexion gray. The door's creak woke her, and she slowly opened her eyes, a light briefly brightening them. Sam, you're here? I sat down, holding her hand. Mom, you're looking much better. You seem spirited. She coughed a couple of times, forcing a difficult smile. Not many days left. I didn't respond, just chatted about interesting things lately. We went silent when there was nothing left to say. Helen's mom reclined against the pillows. The room fell silent. I patted her hand. Mom, you rest well. I'll visit again next time. As I was leaving, she suddenly called out, Sam, divorce Helen. I froze. What? She's still seeing that guy, right? No, I forced a smile. Don't worry about it, Mom. Sam, your eyes don't smile anymore, she said seriously, pointing at my mouth, then her heart. Your mouth is smiling, but not your heart. You're not happy. She was out of breath but insisted on finishing. I was speechless. Don't keep it up just for me, you're still young. She smiled weakly. Divorce her and live your own life. For some reason, my eyes, as a 30-year-old man, got a little teary. Helen's mom patted my hand. You're a good man. Don't waste more time because of me. Mom. I felt a tightness in my throat and couldn't speak. She just smiled gently. I'm just happy you came to see me. Then she struggled to take an envelope out of a drawer and handed it to me. Inside are my company shares, 13% in total. Helen has treated you unfairly these years. Consider this my way of making it up to you. She pushed it into my hands. You must accept it and take good care of yourself from now on. I was stunned and immediately tried to refuse. Mom, I can't take this. But she just smiled and patted my hair. Don't ever compromise yourself like that again. That night I didn't go home. I went straight to Karina's place. She was happy to see me. But when she held my hand, her expression changed. Why are you so warm? I touched my forehead and realized I had a fever. Karina helped me to the bed, tucked me in, and soon returned with a cup of hot ginger tea. She gently helped me sit up, drink something hot and sweat it out. Then she crawled into bed and held me. I frowned. I don't want to get you sick. She just gave me a quick peck on the cheek. I'm not worried. Then she opened her phone. Bored? Want me to tell you a story? I couldn't help but chuckle. A grown man like me listening to stories? Karina ignored me, cleared her throat, and snuggled closer to my neck. Once upon a time, there was a princess with skin as white as snow, hair as black as ebony, and lips as red as blood. But her heart was dark, so they called her the black-hearted princess. The prince kissed the princess, and she coughed up the poisoned apple, coming back to life. Then the prince and princess got married. I thought the story was over and just about shut my eyes when Karina continued. But after marriage, the prince found out the black-hearted princess was a serial cheater and didn't treat him well. So he shoved the poisoned apple back down her throat and married a younger, prettier, kinder princess. They lived happily ever after. I couldn't help but laugh. What kind of story is this? Karina gave me a sly smile, gently patting me. The evening breeze lifted the light curtains, carrying in the faint scent of gardenias from outside. Occasionally, a car would softly pass by, while the light outside filtered gently through the sheer curtains. Karina's warmth engulfed me as she held on tightly. She seemed like a kid clinging to her most precious treasure. Felt strange but comforting. Even though she's years younger than me, she made me feel secure. Right before I dozed off, I heard a whispered sigh in my ear. Hurry and get divorced. The princess can't wait much longer. The next morning, I returned home early. Helen was on the couch, frowning as usual when she saw me. Where were you last night? I called and you didn't answer. I had fallen asleep at Karina's place, and my phone was on silent. I did see 3 missed calls, all from Helen. I replied casually, it's none of your business. Helen's eyes darkened, and she awkwardly explained. Alex needed me for something last night. No need to explain. I slipped on house shoes, impatient. I'm not interested. I used to be desperate to know Helen's every move. Everything with Alex consumed me. But now I don't even want to know. I came back for a divorce. I threw the divorce papers at her. Your mom knows about us. She transferred her shares to me. You keep your 7%. I want a divorce soon, or I'll submit your cheating evidence to court. I still have Alex's photos saved on my phone. Helen froze. I kept that photo to remind myself of the humiliation. Every time I saw it, my love for Helen faded a little more, until it was gone. Didn't we agree not to divorce yet? Helen frowned. Sam, are you really that eager to be with that girl? She let out a mocking laugh. You think she'll be better than me? There's such an age gap. Could you have anything in common? Do you still think you'll be a thing after 10 years? She shook her head, full of scorn. Sam, you're still so naive. I turned to her. This woman, whom I'd eagerly married, now seemed so repulsive. At least she's not a serial cheater like you. Without mercy, I laughed coldly. Helen, how shameless must you be to ruin someone's life like this? Helen stiffened, silent. Are other people just side characters in your life story? I walked over, staring her down, mocking at each syllable. Does anyone know Alex is your affair partner? Helen abruptly stood up. Don't speak so harshly. Your actions are worse than my words. I scoffed. You think I want to waste my breath on you? Sign the divorce papers. Let's part ways. I don't care if you worship him in your ancestral hall. Helen's eyes were icy. After a long silence, a faint smile formed, devoid of warmth. Fine if that's what you want. Sam, don't regret it. I scoffed, pulling out a pen and handing it to her. Hurry up. Her face darkened as she glared at me, biting her lip while signing her name, then thrust the papers back at me. Happy now? I nodded. The office opens tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. With Helen, I was elated since the moment she signed her name, eager to tell Karina. She was thrilled too. Really? Then I'll come in the morning, and we can get our marriage certificate. Save you another trip. I'll go grab my documents now. It took some convincing to keep her from rushing off, promising we'd meet the parents first. Today, a mutual friend was getting married, and we drove separately but ended up at the same table. I treated her like air. She placed food on Alex's plate, smiling, "Eat more." She took a quick, subtle glance at me. Alex looked a bit stiff. Helen, I don't eat seafood. Others at the table tried to break the awkward silence. So, are you and Alex finally tying the knot? When's the wedding? We can't wait for the invite. Helen stayed silent. Alex forced a smile and looked at me, saying, Yeah, everyone has to come when the time comes. Another friend joked, You two have been together since high school. Remember that punk who tried to hit on you, Helen, and Alex saved the day. I guess you had to repay the favor by being with him. Alex's face turned a bit awkward, and he quickly changed the subject. Let's not bring up the past. She's not with me because of that. Helen chimed in, Well, it started because of that. Alex's face grew even more uncomfortable. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know there was this history between Alex and Helen. But it didn't concern me, so I looked down, uninterested. What a coincidence. Another friend at the table spoke up. Remember Sam? He saved a girl too. A bunch of jerks cornered her, and when she resisted, they tried to hit her with a bat. Sam stepped in, and it could have been bad for her otherwise. He complained. Sam had to take a break from school for half a year and ended up transferring. And that girl never even said thanks. That blow messed up Sam's leg even now. He stopped, glancing at my expression. I wasn't too bothered by it. It's been so long. I wasn't seeking gratitude. Out of nowhere, Helen stood up abruptly. She knocked over some cups and bowls, red wine spilling down her dress, but she didn't seem to care. Her eyes fixated on me, and she asked, trembling, What did you say? Alex seemed panicked, quickly standing and grabbing her hand. Helen, your dress is dirty. Let's go change. But Helen shook him off, gritting her teeth. Sam, when did you save that girl? I didn't get why she reacted so strongly. Everyone was looking at us, and I didn't want to ruin my friend's wedding. I frowned and thought for a moment. Can't remember the exact day. It was the summer of 14. Maybe August? Come on, sit down. It's their wedding. Helen's expression suddenly turned really weird, like she was in disbelief, maybe even panicked. What did you say to her in the end? Even though it's been ages, I clearly remember the pain, and I think I said, Don't be afraid. Something like that. Helen sat back down, looking defeated. Her face showed both tears and laughter, and then she just covered it tightly. Alex was pale as a ghost, shaking uncontrollably. Even a fool would understand what's going on now. I raised my eyebrows. You were the one who got beaten up back then? What a pity. I grinned. If I had known it was you, I might have just let them beat you to death. I said my piece and left the table. The rest of the story was filled in by a friend later that evening. Turns out, after you saved Helen, she tried to find you everywhere. That night you got beaten up, Alex was just watching. He'd always liked Helen, so he stepped in and took your place. You should have seen Helen's face earlier. She looked terrified. She even sent me a video. In the video, Alex looked terrible, his voice trembling. Yes, I admit it was a mistake back then to deceive you, but does that mean all these years of feelings were fake too? You said you loved only me. Sure, Sam saved you, but you don't love him, right? You can't suddenly love him because he saved you once. Helen's expression was ice cold, and the love in her eyes replaced with the kind of hatred reserved for sworn enemies. She pushed him away, her voice icy. Alex, this isn't over. A friend gleefully shared. Alex is done for. Heard his dad has an illegitimate son and left everything to him. Alex came back to cling to Helen, and now Helen's cut him off for money. Took back the villa and the car. Sounds like she's not stopping there. I put my phone down, feeling conflicted. I wasn't as calm as I appeared. What a tangled mess. Helen liked Alex because he took my place, and she ended up hurting me. Out of us three, I'm the one who got hit the hardest. Do I harbor resentment? I asked myself. I still can't fully recover my leg from saving her. But she rewarded me by ruining my marriage. How can I not hate? If I could go back to that night 10 years ago, I tell myself, I'd never save Helen. Helen came back really late. She reeked of alcohol, totally smashed. I reminded her, remember, divorce tomorrow. Don't forget. But Helen ignored me, slurring her words from the couch. I've cut things off with Alex. He lied to me. I pulled all the money invested in his company. His family's about to crash. He's got nothing left. Is that enough for you? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. And you? Aren't you the one who should really be damned? Helen was stunned. After a while, she just fell to her knees right on top of me. I was startled and took a step back instinctively, only to see her lift her hand and deliver a hard slap to her own face. She didn't hold back at all, and the corner of her mouth split, oozing blood. What are you doing? I exclaimed, shocked. Helen looked up, her eyes full of pleading. I know I was wrong. You can hit me, curse me, whatever you want. Sam, I'll make it up to you. I have 42% of the company's shares. They're yours if you want. Just forgive me. She hung her head low, her shoulders shaking. The room was silent except for Helen's low sobs, like a deserted animal's whimper. I had no words. Back then, my parents thought about going to the police, but then we heard those thugs got attacked themselves, slashed even, and 3 of them had their Achilles tendons cut. They were left crazy. My parents didn't push for reporting it after that, probably didn't want to drag me through statements and all that hassle. So, I never saw Helen from those days again. But Alex was right. Knowing it was me who saved her, would Helen love me? Maybe if we hadn't had that misunderstanding, and she met Alex, she'd still like him. Talking about it now means nothing. Agreeing to divorce is the best thanks you can give me. My face showed no emotion. No. Helen crawled over, hugging my leg in panic. I won't divorce you. I was wrong before. I'll make it up to you. I promise I won't see any other man again. I've already cut ties with Alex. Please, I'm begging you. Never saw this coming. Such a complication. I couldn't help but snap. You two even went to the gynecologist together. You're having a kid, right? You want me to be the fool? Tears streamed down Helen's face, any hint of her former haughtiness gone. She said with red-rimmed eyes, I don't have a child with him. He was just feeling unwell and asked me to accompany him. He said he'd been suffering since that incident, so I felt indebted. I went to the gyno because a friend needed me to pick up some meds. Maybe it was too much to drink, but Helen looked different from her usual self. She hesitated before croaking out, I've actually liked you all along. but I always felt I owed Alex, so I'd agree to whatever he asked. When you asked for divorce, my first reaction was to refuse. Sam, I've liked you all along. I couldn't hold back any longer and slapped her across the face. Helen groaned, turning her head away. Helen, don't degrade the meaning of like. You make me sick. I said coldly, if I'd known it'd come to this, I'd have wished you died in that alley back then. Helen turned pale, staring at me in disbelief. I picked up the divorce papers and slammed the door as I left. Sure enough, the next day, Helen didn't show up at the civil affairs office. She called me relentlessly, always saying the same thing. She'd compensate me, but she wouldn't agree to a divorce. It made me seethe with anger. Helen already wasted so many years of my life, and just when I'm about to move on to better days, she won't let me go. Since she made the first move, I wouldn't hold back either. I sold the 13% shares Helen's mom gave me to the company's second largest shareholder. That person originally held 32%, making it 45% now, surpassing Helen and toppling her from her chairman position. Years of Helen's hard work, just handed over like that. She called that same day, sounding a bit sad. Sam, do you really hate me that much? I'm done with this mess with you, I said coldly. Helen was silent for a long time before finally speaking. Do whatever makes you happy. I've already missed my chance with you. I can't miss it again. Finally, I took Helen to court, presenting evidence of her affair with Alex. Once I sued twice, she'd have to agree to divorce, even if she didn't want to. Our divorce got messy, since it involved share transfers and splitting assets. The whole company knew about our divorce drama. I was so busy every day, I barely had time to see Karina. But when it rains, it pours. Just as I was burning the midnight oil sorting our divorce assets, Helen suddenly called again. Her voice on the line was shaking uncontrollably. Sam, come quickly. My mom is not okay. When I got there, Helen's mom was awake. She looked ashen, not in good shape. I lowered my head, feeling a little awkward. She gave me those shares, and I turned around and sold them to her daughter's rival. I did go too far, but she didn't blame me. Instead, she struggled to wave me over, her hand barely lifting. I walked over, tears in my eyes. Mom, Helen, already sobbing uncontrollably, clung to her mother's hand, quietly weeping. Everyone has this day coming. Helen's mom forced a smile through the effort, lightly patting Helen. Don't be sad. Her voice grew weaker, but she still tried to speak. Helen, I heard you're refusing to divorce. Helen wiped her tears, saying, Mom, Alex tricked me before. Now I know Sam is the one who saved me back then. I really can't lose him again. Helen's mom sighed. Sam is good to you. Since you got married, he's been there for you every day. After marriage, despite your antics, he never blamed you, waiting for you to come back. Now. She paused for a rest. Now you know he saved you. She closed her eyes. Helen panicked. Mom, please don't scare me. Wake up, Mom. Helen's mom opened her eyes, using her last bit of energy to hoarsely say, Helen, promise me my last wish. Helen nodded frantically, tears flowing nonstop. Mom, I promise you, whatever you say. Get a divorce from Sam. She clutched Helen's hand tightly. You two aren't meant to be. Don't hold him back any longer. He's a good kid. I felt a mix of emotions. I didn't expect Helen's mom to be thinking about me in the end. Helen was stunned. After a while, she slid down from the bed bit by bit, collapsing onto the floor. Her fingers turned pale from gripping too hard, nails cracked, with blood seeping out. Eventually, she pulled her hands back, covering her face. Her body shook violently. Her cries were hoarse, wrenching. Okay, she said. Mom, I promise you, I'll agree to the divorce. Helen's mom's hand froze for a moment, then fell suddenly. It was days later by the time we took care of Helen's mom's affairs. Helen and I met at the civil affairs office as planned. She'd lost a lot of weight, her clothes flapping loose in the breeze. Do we really have to divorce? Right before walking into the office, she suddenly spoke up, clutching the divorce agreement tightly. You loved me so much, and now I know I was wrong. Can't we start over? Her expression was almost pleading. You can punish me however you want, do whatever to me, just please don't leave me. Okay? She covered her face, sobbing. I won't care about you and that woman, do whatever outside, just as long as you come home. I gazed at the horizon, thinking for a second. Helen, who is it you love? Me, Alex, or that illusion of the one who saved you? If Alex hadn't tricked you, and you met her again, would you still like him? She hurriedly replied, of course not. I shook my head, smiling. It doesn't matter anymore. If you have any sense of kindness towards me, let me go. Helen, I truly don't love you anymore. The wind tousled her bangs, and I seemed to see her eyes turning red. Then she mustered a fragile smile. Fine, Sam, I'll let you go. In the end, her voice seemed choked. Each word was harder to say. The house, car, shares, savings, they're all yours. I'll leave with nothing. She pulled out a new agreement. Consider it compensation for you. If you don't want me, then take the money. Flipping through the divorce agreement, I was shocked to find Helen was giving me not just what we had together, but everything she had. All 42% of the company's shares transferred to me, and she left nothing of the household assets or cash for herself. I didn't want to be tied to her anymore, so I refused. No need. She just gave a bitter laugh. If you don't take it, then I won't divorce. I had no choice but to sign my name. I didn't ask her what she'd do next. Whatever happens is none of my business now. I won't soften my heart towards her again. Divorcing is much quicker than getting married. We got that green booklet in no time. Walking out, Helen looked at me with a complicated expression, her eyes fixed on me. I waved. Goodbye. She stayed silent. I drove my Bentley into the distance. Through the rear-view mirror, I saw Helen standing there, not moving for a long time. She seemed to say something, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Cars gradually blocked her from view. Our worlds separated and disappeared from each other's sight. I turned my gaze back. Goodbye, Helen. Hope we never meet again. Chapter 9, Helen's Perspective. 2 years after Sam and I divorced, I ran into him at a bridal shop. I was there to pick up a dress my cousin had ordered. Just as I was about to leave, a woman walked out of the fitting room, holding a wedding dress. He looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that it almost seemed to melt away. I froze, staring at him. It had been a while. He seemed better, in a way. The woman twirled around and ran to him, excitement in her eyes. Do I look good? His face broke into a smile, and he softly replied, You look beautiful. Suddenly, I was reminded of years ago. Back then, we had just gotten our marriage certificate. He was pulling me along, eager to show me different wedding dresses. What was my reaction then? If I recall, my mind was occupied with Alex, and I was just impatient, barely looking up. Sure, just pick any, I had said. As I was leaving, I glanced back. He stood there, his previously tense shoulders slumped, and the smile faded from his lips. He looked a bit lost. A sharp pain jabbed at my heart. When I looked at him again, he was taking a photo of her, hands shaking a little. Then they sat together, whispering as their heads hovered close. I think this dress makes my arms look a bit big. Don't you think this one's better? She said. This one? I think the third one is the best. I asked the saleslady earlier, and she said the embroidery and rhinestones were all handmade and shipped from Paris. Now that you mention it, the third one does sound nice. No rush, you can try on more and we can always swap. But for now, let's stick with this one, okay? She's better to him than I was. I should be happy for him. But for some reason, I suddenly felt a tightness in my chest, as if something was lodged in my throat. It was almost hard to breathe. Clearly, he should have been with me. But I lost him, so now someone else gets to make him happy. In these 2 years since leaving Sam, I've realized just how much I still love him. There hasn't been a single day when I didn't think of him. On the rare occasion I get drunk, I dream of him. Not the way he looked when we fought so much, but how he was right after we got married. He cooked my favorite meals, gave me foot rubs after a long day, and insisted on a goodbye kiss every morning. Back then, I didn't realize how lucky I was and sometimes found him irritating. But in my dreams, I cried tears of joy. When I woke up alone the next morning, the emptiness and sadness were suffocating. That's how I got into the habit of drinking. When I'm drunk, I can briefly feel like he's still loving me. I know it's not healthy, but I can't help it. I keep replaying our memories, falling for him all over again in my mind, and I can't stop. Stupid, really. Why did it take him leaving for me to realize how much I love him? I don't know how long I stood there watching them, but I was soaking up every last second. Even if he was in love with someone else, it hurt me to look, but I couldn't look away. Before long, she decided on a dress, and they walked out, arm in arm. When he caught sight of me, he paused. She glanced over too. Then I remembered. She was the young girl he'd been seeing back in the day. Now she's matured, her youthful awkwardness gone. With a drink in her hand, a friend remarked, "Long time no see." My voice trembled as I replied, almost too shaky to speak. "Long time no see." I wanted to ask him more. Ask if he was doing well, and whether she was better for him than me. If she wasn't, maybe he'd come back to me. But in the end, I couldn't say a word. He waved, clearly not wanting to talk further, and took her away. As they walked away, I overheard her asking him, "Your ex-wife? She's changed a lot." I almost didn't recognize her. He replied coolly, "Someone unimportant, not worth recognizing." The two of them got into a car and drove off quickly. I watched as the car vanished down the street. I remember when we divorced, I watched him leave too. This time, though, it feels like a real goodbye. It seemed like he was genuinely happy. I'm glad, really. As for me, I probably won't find happiness like that again. But that's okay. As long as he's happy. Sam, I wish you all the best. And this time I truly mean it.